Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Eliza. I'm a senior in Weinberg. I major in poli-sci and Middle East North Africa studies. And with Natalie Myron, I'm the co-founder of the new MENA Undergrad Group, which has just started. This is our first event. And we're super happy to have this new undergrad group. There's been a grad group for a while, but we really want to create a space for undergrads who are in the MENA Studies program or who are interested in the MENA region to have a community, to talk with like-minded peers, and to increase involvement from undergrads in MENA events here at Northwestern. So we're super excited for this event, and I think Natalie will be continuing this great work next year, hosting lots more great events. So I will now introduce our moderator for this event. Sami Hermez, an anthropologist, is Associate Professor and Director of the Liberal Arts Program at NUQ, and he is the author of War is Coming: Between Past and Future Violence in Lebanon. And relevant to this event, he's also the author of the article Activism as Part-Time Activity, Searching for Commitment and Solidarity in Lebanon.
Thank you, Eliza, and thank you to the MENA undergrad group. This is a weird, can I switch the, I feel like I'm really talking to myself. If I switch the gallery, does that switch everyone to gallery? Okay. Yeah, because I'm just like staring at myself. Um, so thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you to the MENA Undergrad Group for this really, honestly, this really unique event, bringing two student groups from across the world together. I find just pretty awesome, and it's a really sort of creative idea to put them in conversation. So it's really an honor, and I was excited when I was asked to do this, to take part in this conversation, connecting and learning from struggles, global struggles, and people who are working in their different sort of contexts. The organizers sent me an article when they invited me that they had been reading as they conceived of this event. And I really don't know a better way to start than by quoting from this article by Donna Honarpiche. I don't know if I'm saying her name right. It's in a special issue in Critical Times, and I encourage all of you to check out the special issue. So where Honarpiche says that the time of student organizing is not one of rupture or unidirectional movement. Rather, it undulates in multiple directions, demonstrating a dynamic historical memory important for political mobilization. Meaning, when we organize on campuses today, we must be attentive to history, historical memory, to the connections drawn to mobilizations of the past, that we are not alone, that we draw strength from our ancestors, those students who fought before us, who drew their own connections with their communities and saw their struggles as international ones. Honarpiche also tells us that, to quote, students across the globe prove that despite discriminatory structures and epistemic erasures, there is still potential in engaging with the university and using its grounds critically and collectively as a stage for public protest. And it's from campuses around the world, or at least from students building connections from within and beyond university spaces, that radical mobilizations develop. So in this event, the organizers, I believe, wanted to draw on these shared visions for another world, from these shared struggles for institutional transformation and for social justice, to start a conversation across global time and space. Literally different time zones, I guess, right? What can we learn from each other? What can we build together? What can we carry forward from the memories, experiences, and intimacies of struggles that we share? So I want it to be really brief because this isn't about me. So I'm just gonna introduce the speakers. And then I'll begin with some questions for them as a collective to start sort of discussing their points of view. And then we'll open it to the audience, and hopefully we can get 15 to 20 minutes of discussion with all of you. So the speakers, and I guess it's in no particular order, but the first speaker is Lara Sabra, who is a graduate student studying anthropology at AUB. Her involvement in activism began in high school when she co-founded a feminist club that organized campaigns against rape culture and focused on raising awareness on issues related to gender and sexuality. Currently, she's the president of the AUB Secular Club, which is the biggest independent student-led club in Lebanon, and that focuses on amplifying the voices of students and youth and fighting for a secular, democratic, and socially just society. Our next speaker is Rachel Quack, is an undergraduate student in the School of Education and Social Policy, studying human development and psychological services with a minor in Asian American Studies and a certificate in civic engagement. She's also a current member of Students Organizing for Labor Rights at NU, or SOLR. Niva Legale is a second-year student, as our third speaker, sorry, is a second-year student at Northwestern, majoring in social policy and political science and minoring in Latin American and Caribbean studies. She's been working with SOLR since July of last year and is involved with the Sustainable Mutual Aid and Union committees. So thank you to the three of you for agreeing to speak with us today, this evening. So I'm going to begin. What I'll do is I'm just going to throw out the questions, and you know, maybe you can each, I guess, take turns. Maybe we can start the first one with the Secular Club. Basically, so the first question I wanted to get us to start with was if you could each tell me or tell us what your organization is about, what your club is about. So introduce your group, what kind of activities do you engage in, and what are your main goals? What causes do you struggle for? And how does your organization articulate their demands, both within and against the university? So maybe some examples. And maybe we can start with you, Lara, and then we can move on to SOLR.
Hi, thank you so much for the introduction and for having me speak at this event. I'm really excited to participate in this discussion. So the Secular Club at AUB in Lebanon is an independent student-led club that was created in 2008 by 8 students who wanted a space to practice politics that was separate from, but also opposed to, the sectarian binary that dominated the country at the time. Since then, we've grown to over 200 members every year, and we're joined together by our main goal to fight for a secular, democratic, and socially just society. So the club advocates for a variety of causes under the umbrella of secularism in Lebanon, which include feminism, environmentalism, anti-racism, and freedom of expression. And we also advocate for the rights of students and youth, especially in the current situation in Lebanon, where the country has been facing an economic and a political collapse, which the students and youth have been made to carry the burden of. So we do this in many ways. There are many different activities and initiatives that we participate in or that we start ourselves. One of the main things that we do is run for student elections, so for representation in the student council, but we also organize events and campaigns and discussions, and also protests. So I think notably this past year, we tried to mobilize through a strike and then through trying to create a safety net because of the exponential increase in tuition fees at AUB. But I think something else that we did in the past year that I find to be really important is march that we organized in October against the increasing rate of sexual violence in the country. So I think that's mainly it for the ways that we articulate our demands within and against the university. I think that, so like I said, through protests and demonstrations and through syndic work, through student elections, and also through general mobilization, through strikes, and also through trying to create networks within the student body, like safety nets, in order to allow students to be able to safeguard and continue their education. So that's mainly it.
Thank you, Lara. And I think this question is actually really important because we are looking at such, vastly different contexts. And so it's useful to see that, sort of this comparison or the differences, similarities of how people are working. So Rachel or Niva, I don't know who would like to take that first question.
Yeah, I can go ahead and introduce SOLR. So Students Organizing for Labor Rights began in 2018 when our university switched food providers. And during the course of that, we canvassed and wrote a petition and also met with service workers and administration to ensure a smooth transition. Since then, our work has centered on supporting workers. That's especially been true during a pandemic. We focused a lot on financial support. But in general, we are a coalition of unpaid undergraduate students, and our goal is to build solidarity with campus service workers through mutual aid, campaigns, actions, and direct communication. And our vision is towards collective liberation, which I believe has parallels with what the AUB Secular Club does. We want to hold Northwestern University, which is an extremely wealthy institution. We seek to hold it accountable and its responsibility for supporting all members of the community, not just students or professional faculty. We also want to hold them accountable to the violence and exploitation that they enact on low-income, Black, Indigenous, POC, queer, trans students. In terms of articulating our demands, it has focused a lot on communication and direct action. As students, we have resources that we are able to leverage within this institution, and we leverage these privileges in order to demand better conditions for workers. So a lot of it has we drafted a petition in March of 2020 that demanded that workers receive the back pay that Northwestern University promised and then did not follow through on. We also established our mutual aid fund in March of last year. Since then, we've raised, I believe we're at $90,000. Rachel, correct me if I'm wrong. But we have successfully raised an incredible amount of money that has been directly distributed to workers. And this is sustainable mutual aid, but also part of what SOLR wants to do is make it so that we don't need to exist. We, as a student organization, we shouldn't need to exist at an institution that has billions of dollars in endowment funds. We should not have to organize so that service workers are best supported. So our end goal is to see our demands met, and so that this kind of articulation of demands isn't as necessary in the future. And Rachel, did you want to add on to that?
Yeah, Niva basically got a lot of it down for me. Thank you, Niva. Hello again, my name is Rachel Quack. I'm a fourth year here at Northwestern. So this is how professors feel when they lecture in front of a class. I'm a little bit nervous, not gonna lie, but essentially I just also wanted to add, like, how SOLR started was very based upon relationships built with service workers, and those relationships were usually found amongst service workers, but as well as low-income students here at Northwestern. I remember when SOLR first started, I actually wasn't a part of it because I had 2 jobs at the time and I couldn't be a part of it. And so how ironic, right? Because of labor, I couldn't join the labor organizing union for students. But essentially, it started with very genuine relationships where students here at Northwestern could see their low-income communities back home reflected in the service workers here at Northwestern, and really just feeling like a moral obligation to have to advocate for people who represent people from home, people who represent, like for me, like my grandparents who are service workers, or I mean, I've been a service worker throughout undergrad, my undergraduate years. And so, yeah, just to emphasize again, like this is literally just, it started with some students who want to show some love and show that service workers deserved a lot more than they were getting in terms of treatment from the university.
That's great. I'm just listening to you, thinking also that there might be some thinking to do also with our campus, with service workers and so on. So shifting, I wanted to ask you a little bit, to talk a little bit about some of your sort of biggest struggles or obstacles or challenges that you faced in your activism across, again, these two varying contexts. So Lara, shift back to you.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think there are definitely like a lot of different obstacles and restrictions that we face, both at the level of the university and in the country at large, especially with the worsening situation in the country over the past 2 years. I think the main three things that come to my mind, though, are first of all, I think just the general difficulty of convincing people or of trying to mobilize at a time when, like in the aftermath and while experiencing a worsening economic crisis in the country, and in the aftermath of an explosion that devastated half of the capital. So on August, there was the Beirut port explosion, which destroyed half the city. So I think that there's always been a general atmosphere of cynicism in Lebanon, but increasingly recently. And this makes it hard to kind of convince people of the necessity of being politically active when they've kind of succumbed to the idea or are convinced that nothing is going to change. I think that's one of the main things that we've struggled with dealing with. Another obstacle that we face is the general depoliticization of the student body at AUB. So there's this idea that politics belongs outside of the university, that there needs to be the separation between on-campus and off-campus life. So one of our main goals is to reveal the ways in which politics affects everything that we do, and kind of show how the issues that students are facing within the university are intrinsically related to the situation in the country. And I think the most obvious example of this would be the tuition fee increase. So this past year, AUB changed the exchange rate between the dollar and the Lebanese pound for their tuition fees. They increased it, which meant that the tuition fees increased by 160%. So obviously this was an outcome of the economic crisis in the country, as well as the university's own financial mismanagement. So I think that is something that we've kind of, that we face on a daily basis and trying to mobilize. And the last one I think is just, I think it's just the lockdown and the pandemic that forced us, that made us have to completely change our tactics and the way that we do politics, and have to learn new skills very quickly and be able to do outreach or reach people through online channels and social media So that's kind of like a work in progress. Like we're still learning how to do that. So I think, yeah, these are the main three things that come to mind, but I'm interested in hearing from the others.
Yeah, what you were saying about having to be in a remote format is very reflective of what SOLR's been struggling with the past, I guess, a year and a half now. Part two is also SOLR has a non-hierarchical leadership model. And so we do have committees, but we don't have specific leaders within those. And so that has led to specific people or individuals taking a lot of things. And so, but those individuals, often that's not sustainable, and that's led to a lot of burnout. That's also the case because our mutual aid fund is something that's ongoing. We recently added a monthly donor system in order to make it more sustainable. But similar to what you were saying about how people coalesce around certain events, what they see is like a certain crisis. We had a huge influx of donations when the pandemic first started and hundreds of workers were laid off. But what's difficult is getting people to understand that this is an ongoing crisis. Northwestern's continuously enacting violence against its service workers and other marginalized groups in the university and in the institution. And so getting people to understand that this is something that continuously needs support has been difficult in terms of financial support, but also just in terms of commitment to SOLR as an organization. So that's something that we've been struggling with in terms of like burnout and our leadership. And also in terms of interacting with the university, our university president recently started being open to meeting with students individually. He's been criticized a lot for his handling of the issues with service workers, but also the police department at our school. And so he initiated meetings with students, and in some of those meetings, he has told representatives from SOLR that this isn't something that should be discussed by student organizations. It's between Northwestern University and Compass, which is the group that employs service workers. And so that's similar to also what you were talking about, Lara, about the depoliticization of the student body and telling us that this isn't our place. So that's something we've had to fight back against. And Rachel, I think you had something to add about our coalition work too.
Yeah, so basically on campus, I would say there are a couple of organizing student groups. I think that one of the issues we've come across is that SOLR has had a reputation of being put in the binary of like a good student organizing group in terms of, as opposed to like NU Communities Not Cop, which is like the abolishing Northwestern's police, which for the record, we do stand with NUCNC, but there's this binary where it's like, oh, like SOLR is just like, there's less opposition because they deem it as less violent. They deem it as less, honestly, just more palatable to like charity work, and more so instead of like solidarity and mutual aid. And so that has been an issue because, I mean, we've led marches with NUCNC and there was heavy police presence. They didn't care if we were SOLR members or NUCNC members. And one of our demands, you know, was the reason we were standing with NUCNC, other than like that we want them to be NUPD to be abolished, but also because the amount of money that this institution pours into that department that they could be giving to service workers instead. There's like that connection there, and there's that bridge there. And yeah, essentially that's an issue that we've been having to deal with. And I think Neva covered all the other issues, and so we could probably move on to the next question.
Well, I actually wanted to just on this, you raise a really interesting point, Rachel, about this kind of binary of the good student group and the bad student organizing group. And I was curious also on the AUB side if there's some of that going on. If you know, how are you perceived as a secular club, and also the sort of question of tactics in terms of, you know, what you were saying, Rachel, that the NU, I forget the name of the group, not cops, and how they're seen as community not cops are seen as more violent. So I was curious if some of the same kind of ways that the institution operates in Lebanon.
It's a really good question, actually. Yeah, I think that the secular club has always kind of had like a same consistent, I guess if you want to talk about perception, it is perceived to be aggressive towards the administration or radical. And I think that the dynamics in Lebanon now are changing. So before, our like main contenders, maybe like on campus, like the people, like the groups that we would either have to run against for elections, or then after elections have to cooperate, like coordinate with on syndic work in the student council, were the establishment parties, like their student groups on campus. And there was the obvious opposition there, where like those establishment parties were allied to the ruling class, and so often like constantly acquiesced to the administration. Now, since these dynamics are changing, I think that like after the October 17 uprising, which was basically a general uprising against the like sectarian ruling class, I think what's emerging is that there is this difference between like a radical student politics that isn't afraid to take a stand against the administration or against anything that harms the interests of marginalized groups or students or youth, which I think this is how we're perceived in like the idea of being radical, and other groups that might be more moderate or centrist or pragmatic is maybe how they would describe themselves. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's mainly what comes to mind.
Yeah, no, I think, yeah, definitely answers the question. I think you just the idea of that you see these kind of similar dynamics. Although as someone who knows the context, you said it quite well, and in a way that I wasn't expecting, actually, because I would think that the established political parties, because they tend to have like their how do you call it in English, like the shabiha or something, the guys who like gonna come in and use the violence would be seen as the violent type, whatever, but actually they're also seen as the ones who will be more sort of who are going to work with the institution, which is interesting. So actually you end up looking like you're the ones that nobody likes, right? So just to kind of also move in slightly different directions towards thinking about connections, I want to sort of combine two questions. One is how do your respective organizations connect their local campus demands to broader global movements, but then also thinking about how your groups, as operating in these different contexts, what kind of connections do you see between your struggles, right? Between students in the US and students in West Asia or Lebanon, or however you want to think about it. So there's both thinking in terms of how do you connect to global movements, but then also how do you see your struggles and connecting to students in your various contexts between the two of you. Lara, yeah, if you want to.
Okay, should I go first? I mean, honestly, before like joining the discussion, I really wasn't sure. I mean, I could see. I think I think to answer broadly, I think the main connections or yeah, I think like connections between struggles would be like the general struggle towards liberation, or whether this is for women or people of color or refugees in our own context, and also maybe in the US, and young people like students and workers. I think that obviously the contexts are extremely different, but I think that the general goal is the same, and I think that we feel like while the nature of the struggle is obviously different, I think that especially hearing like the other speakers talk, and I really can see the general like the connections and linkages. I think that this was also clear last year when Black Lives Matter, the protests started in the US. Obviously, they made international news, and this made us like there's been a anti-racism movement in Lebanon, obviously, for a long time to support migrant workers who come to Lebanon from different countries like Ethiopia and Sri Lanka and the Philippines, and face a lot of racism under the sponsorship system or the kafala. So this, I think this made it very clear to me, like how those kinds of struggles intersect, or kind of these connections are existent. It's just that the nature or the context is different. But yeah, I mean, I guess this would be my answer for connections between struggles. When it comes to connecting local demands to broader movements, I think that we often, like over the years, draw from, like we do kind of very shallow research and like draw on student movements in other countries, as well as like the student body in different universities to kind of develop our own demand. So in AUB, for example, we don't have, like I've said that we run for student council several times, but we don't actually have a student council. What we have is a council that is formed out of students and administrators and professors. So obviously this hinders a lot of our work and like our ability to express our dissent in the university. So something that we've been able to draw inspiration from, or that we've been able to use, is examples of student councils and what they're able to do in the US or in the UK, for example. We and I think most notably over the past year, what we were really able to gain from is like whether it's inspiration or motivation or even tactics for campaigning, is tuition strikes or rent strikes that were happening in several countries in the US and in the UK and in Egypt even. So I think this is even recently we're working on an initiative to implement a sexual assault response and prevention center at AUB, because we don't have one. And with the lockdown and the economic situation, the levels of sexual violence have been increasing very quickly in Lebanon. We were able to meet with student-led SARP centers in different universities in the US. And this also, like, we gained a lot from that. So yeah, that's mainly what I think.
Thank you for your response, Lara. Yeah, to be very transparent, we were given these questions beforehand so we can prepare, so it's not like awkward timing and stuff. And so when I first got this question, I honestly, I didn't see many like obvious like connections, and I was kind of, as I was like thinking a little bit more, it honestly came down to like looking at who are the service workers of America. They're usually immigrants. They're usually those who are not given the privilege or opportunities that families who have had generational wealth in this country have. And so looking at actually like some of the relationships that I have with some of the service workers, they're actually from the MENA region. And looking at even just, sorry, I just had like a brain thing, but looking at that, but also looking at like the research funding that Northwestern University gets from like Saudi Arabia, and looking at really these like little connections that you didn't see before, but kind of create this bigger picture. And really, I think like the environment that very intense labor work usually creates is like very vulnerable and very, as Laura mentioned, talking about like sexual violence, for example, like we have had instances where mutual aid is going towards workers who are in dangerous predicaments like that, like so. And yeah, it's also, correct me if I'm wrong, Laura, because I really don't know a lot about Lebanon, I'm gonna be very honest, but so it's very common that universities in America will do a lot of subcontracting for service workers. So essentially instead of directly employing service workers, they'll employ through another company. And this is kind of like methodical, so that when workers have complaints or need something, they keep getting like tennis balled back and forth from the administrators and the subcontractor. And so I was wondering if maybe there's a similarity there in terms of labor and whatnot in the MENA region, and maybe AUB. But yeah, I'll let you maybe, Lara, if you.
I'm actually not sure, but yeah, I'm not sure if they employ their service workers through another company, but yeah, I mean, that's worth looking into. But I know that general, like there is a general problem in the way that they treat their workers. Like I'm just gonna mention one thing, which is last summer, AUB fired 1,000, or was it, I think 800, between 800 and 1,000 workers in one day, because of the economic crisis. And they brought the internal security forces, like the police force, to the university on that day in order to kind of control the situation, which was controlled anyways. So that I think, like, while throughout this event, I've just been remembering that and thinking about about how there really is this general connection between the way that the university administration treats its staff and workers. So yeah, that's interesting to think about.
Just to add one more thing in terms of the connections between our struggles, Lara, something you said in response to a question or two ago was something about other clubs or other student groups being seen as more like pragmatic in their demands and articulations. And that's something that really struck me, is that I think that as students, oftentimes we are not taken as seriously as we should be. We have a lot of resources, and I also think that some of the reasons sometimes that we're not taken seriously, like SOLR and NU community, not COPs included, is that we have a vision towards collective realization, which is very much a global vision that includes people of all different kinds, of all countries, and that I think aligns with the Secular Club's mission as well. And a lot of times that's framed as unrealistic, and that's something that's used to devalue the work that we do, and downplay the intensity and necessity of the work that we're doing. So that's just something that struck me about the global aspect of what we do, but also the way that our student activism is framed by the institution itself.
Also, there's actually a connection between like supporting NU community, not cops, and abolishing police, and actually Free Palestine movements as well, in terms of Israeli police force training being then shipped into like Chicago settings as well. It's the exact same tactics, same methods. And yeah, and so that's obviously a big connection as well.
You know, as you're talking, I think there is a project here on the sort of labor issue across our campuses, and I'm thinking of mine as well, because one thing that here in Qatar, you know, maybe I wasn't really thinking about is the way actually these contracts work everywhere, right? So the way that NUE subcontracts the labor out is the same way that NUQ subcontracts the labor out, and I'm sure AUB probably does similar things. And so it's just, that would be an interesting kind of project to take forward. So the last question that I have, and we can open it up, and feel free, you know, to respond as briefly or as much as, you know, as deeply as you like. The question is, how can activists at NU support AUB causes and vice versa? And if you have any thoughts on those kind of actually material or like actionable possible ideas of how you can support each other.
I mean, I think for me, I think talks, like having these kinds of discussions, and maybe having more of our members interact and like share tactics, like share how we mobilize, how we like aim to work towards our goals, and also maybe just like general political discussions. I think this would be something like beneficial for both of us, like something that would provide support. But maybe that's a bit less tangible. But I guess for AUB, what I think would like for us at AUB, since the university is an American university, and we have the offices in New York, I think, and it's directly linked to the United States. I think any advocacy from the US, from students in the US, for example, against the university's treatment of students, would be like a strong act of solidarity. I think that's what comes to mind. That would be like the strongest thing.
Yeah, I think, I can go?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay,
I was gonna call on you,
cool. Basically, also just more pragmatically, also like social media. Like we can follow each other now. We can amplify each other's demands of like organizations and institutions by even now just like a click of the post on like a story, and Twitter even. And so kind of using those modern day tools to strengthen organizing and campaigning. Yeah, Neva, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think that amplifying each other's demands through social media is definitely an avenue that would be really powerful. And especially because that just serves to raise the visibility of how these things are systemic, how institutions treat people with less privilege or less power in those contexts. And also, I think that drawing parallels between two pretty like disparate political economic climates is useful for demonstrating just how collective like our visions are, and how these do include people across different contexts, across different countries, and really emphasizing the solidarity aspect of that is something that can really reinforce both of our messaging and goals.
Thank you. Those are actually beautiful suggestions from the three of you. I'm glad we're recording this. I hope we can actually do something with those with those suggestions. So I want to open it up. I've received a question myself from someone. I want to privilege people actually speaking rather than writing the questions in the comments, so that it's a bit more interactive. I have a question, but Afsana, you asked me privately, would you rather I just say your question, or do you want to speak up?
Sorry, I'm not going to go on camera, but since there was an emphasis on the situation of service workers, I wanted to know if student labor activists also focus on the plight of the contingent faculty, and many contingent faculty members are actually paid less than many service workers. And that's an untold narrative in many universities.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for that question. By contingent, is that also like adjunct, and like, is that around the same?
Yes.
Yeah, no, I'm actually coincidentally also familiar with that. My mom is an adjunct professor in Tennessee in music, and we've actually, I don't think SOLR has ever had that conversation, to be quite complete honest. I know we've been in like certain spaces with like grad workers who've had like the same type of agenda for benefits and whatnot, that we could definitely mention that during our meetings to see what kind of avenues we could explore for that, because I'm sure SOLR would be interested.
If you put up your hand, I can call on you. The good thing, oh, okay, Kyle.
To everyone for participating, and thank you to MENA for hosting this event, and to Professor Hermez for facilitating. This is really great and really crucial. And thank you to SOLR for all the work that you've done over the past year. I know that it's been really nice to have an outlet to set aside some of my household's income for these issues, and to provide some of the things that to service workers that, frankly, like you pointed out, the university should be providing. So I wanted to ask a question about subcontracting, but then Rachel actually beat me to it and brought it up. So my question isn't fully formed yet, but I'm also wondering if sort of in a way of activism, not necessarily outsourcing, but collaborating and forming coalitions with activist movements that are outside of the university is something that you have experience with, or there can be something fruitful there to, also in terms of like how Northwestern University is very kind of separate from the rest of the Evanston community, and the administration very intentionally kind of tries to create a border between them and the rest of the city. And so I'm wondering like where there's some opportunities perhaps to do some collaborations with activists doing work in North Chicago or Evanston to bring more light to some of the things that the university is doing, and some of the the social inequalities that they're perpetuating, while also having a deeper solidarity with some of these other groups outside the university. And if AUB has any experience with this, and what your thoughts are, and if you have any insights. Thanks so much.
First, I'd like to say that we really appreciate your contributions to the mutual aid fund. That is incredible to hear, and workers really appreciate it. In terms of coalitions with outside groups, I agree that I think it's incredibly important to expand the scope of our work. Northwestern does, and I think it does so effectively. It separates specifically the student population from the realities of the rest of Evanston. Evanston is not just Sheridan Road. And SOLR has in the past done some smaller collaborations with Evanston for Black Lives in terms of, especially on social media, I think has been the main avenue for that in terms of amplifying each other's causes and things like that. But what you said also reminds me of the fact that most of the service workers at Northwestern are not from Evanston. They're from different areas in Chicago. And so that's been partially been a challenge because in terms of like getting supplies and things to workers, that's taken a lot of coordination. I think it's important to recognize that we should be uplifting workers in every aspect, not just in their roles at Northwestern, but also in their own communities. And that's definitely something that we need to examine and expand our activism in.
To answer your question about AUB, actually we often collaborate with groups outside of the university, especially when there are like movements within the country. So in 2015, there was a huge environmental crisis that's still ongoing till today, which was which had to do with waste management in the city. So during that period, we organized with groups outside of the university, political groups and also environmental groups. And then in 2017, we were able to create a network between the Secular Club at AUB and the Secular Club at another private university. And since then, we've been like reaching out to groups of students within different universities in the country that are launching their own like similar student secular clubs. So yeah, we often collaborate with external groups. I think this is, but I guess it's definitely different contextually. Like we do it on broader causes maybe, and especially with the direction that the country is going to, there's often a need to organize on the national level.
Yeah, I was gonna actually, just to jump on that point, is I wonder if you do have plans to kind of nationalize, like have groups on other campuses. And I know with Students for Justice in Palestine, for example, what was effective was that these groups started to pop up on different campuses, and so there was kind of shared, and then there was a national SJP that would organize nationally. So.
Is this question for me?
No, I mean,
or?
it wasn't. It was a question. You don't have to answer it. I was just kind of thinking larger if there were plans, for you for SOLR. I don't know what other kind of student labor groups there are. I mean, I'm sure there are nationally.
Yeah, I mean, we do this through the network that I was talking about, which is called MENA. So it's kind of this attempt or this initiative to take to kind of have a platform for the youth in Lebanon. And this is really important since parliamentary elections might be coming soon in Lebanon, and the voting age in Lebanon is actually 21. So this is obviously an obstacle that we've been trying to mobilize against for a few years now. But yeah, I mean, that's mainly that's one of our goals, is to take the movement within the university to the country at large.
Rebecca.
Yeah, hi. I just want to first thank everyone who's participating in this. This is just such an enlightening conversation, and I feel like I get to eavesdrop on, you know, people doing really important work, talking to each other. So just thank you for that, and thank you to the MENA Undergrad Group, Afnan, Eliza, and Natalie for organizing this. It's just really, really important. I'm wondering if you, I've already learned some surprising things, I think, about student political movements and student activism. And I'm just wondering if anyone had something that you want, you know, something that you thought people often got wrong about student activism that, you know, you would just wish you could just correct that for the record. What would those things be? Like, what kinds of things would you just like people to just know before we even have the conversation? Here's some things I think you should just erase from your brain and let's replace it with something else. What kinds of things might those be?
I have a couple, if that's okay. I think, I think one of the frustrations that I had a little bit earlier on was like, when we were kind of phone banking, emailing, looking for potential donors. And I think a professor, in a well-intentioned way, they asked us if we had like tax benefits or something. Like, I think it's like a 40, I don't know, one of those numbers where it's like you can have a tax benefit for donating. And I remember laughing because it's like, we're literally undergraduate students, like on top of classes, on top of our other whatever, like we just have meetings weekly, and we have this like spreadsheet that students have put so much time into to just literally do mutual aid. And so I just thought it was kind of laughable to like, I think like, I don't know, I think in people's heads, it's this very like well-organized group, and it is to a certain extent, but at the same time, like, and like Neva's already said, like, it shouldn't have to exist. Like, students should never have to step in for the role of an institution. And then there was also a time during mutual aid where like some students would ask like, oh, like, can you post a receipt of like the donation going to like the worker? Like, we just want to confirm, we just want to make sure. And it's like, no, we can't, because we don't want to give you the identity of this worker, first of all, who a lot of them want to stay anonymous, and also it's just kind of like, if you're really so concerned about, it getting through to the right person, then do it yourself. Like, literally do it yourself. And so like, hopefully I'm not coming off too aggressive. I've just been here for 4 years of Northwestern's fun. And so, but yeah, that's what I could think of off the top of my head, if Laura or Neva wants to step in.
Yeah, really quickly, I'll also just say that what also frustrates me about it is the perception, I think, from the institution that this is something that can be graduated out, that it's not an ongoing struggle. I think that delegitimizes the importance of our work, the idea that we can, if we get prominent figures out by a certain point, these issues won't matter as much. That's also something that has been frustrating.
I think for me, I think that a major misconception would be like, I think there are many, but the thing that came into my head immediately is the idea that like, it's not, it's this work that you're not going to get anything out of, or that it's not rewarding work. I think that the thing is about the secular club, or any activist group, is that you're in it because you're like, first and foremost, because there's a cause or an issue or a problem that you're passionate about. So it's something that's bigger than you, obviously. It's something outside of yourself. I think that a lot of the things that we do in university, at least like based on my observations, is like based on our own selves, and academically or professionally, like trying to advance yourself. And obviously that's super important, and I'm not trying to like devalue that. That's what we all want, but the thing about being in an activist group is that you're taking time and energy and pouring it into something that's not related to, that might not actually advance you or develop you in the career sense but it's going to develop you in so many other ways. And I think that this is what I've learned, and something that comes up a lot is what am I going to get out of it? And I think this is very pertinent in Lebanon, where most people now, most young people just want to immigrate. They want to leave the country. So they're looking for the best way, the fastest way in which to do that. But I think this is, it's something that comes up daily that you have to kind of unravel. And sometimes, and it comes up and every time I meet someone new, and sometimes it works to be able to convince them, but usually it's like a long process. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah.
It does. Thank you. Thank you, all three of you. That's so great.
So we're at the top of the hour, I guess, 9 o'clock on my time. I didn't want to keep you much longer, so I think we can maybe conclude it here. I wanted to thank the speakers, Lara, Neva, and Rachel, and also thank Natalie, Afnan, and Eliza for organizing this. And I think I meant it. Some of your ideas for sort of connections and continuing this are really important. And you just got me thinking that, you know, sometimes connections materialize into action and movement building, but sometimes connections just build friendships. And I think those are important too and shouldn't be dismissed or underappreciated. And that these, you know, you sort of, you build different networks. And I think this is a network that one can continue to sort of foster in some of the ways that you actually sort of mentioned. And I think that would be pretty cool if something, you know, continued to develop out of this, and even if it's just political conversations from time to time. So, you know, very low stakes or whatnot. So, but yeah, thank you everyone, and thank you also for inviting me to moderate this. It really was an honor and a pleasure.
Yeah, I just want to say a huge thank you to Professor Hermez for agreeing to moderate, and to all three of our speakers for agreeing to participate, to put yourself and your group out there. I learned a ton, even from SOLR, about Northwestern that I didn't know. So this has been a super great conversation, and thank you all for coming and for agreeing to participate.